In the year 690, a woman of 65 sat down on the dragon throne of China and declared herself emperor. Not empress consort. Not empress regent. Emperor. The supreme sovereign of the most populous civilization on earth, ruling in her own name, by her own authority, answerable to nobody. She had been working toward this moment for 50 years. She had entered the imperial palace at 14 as a concubine of the 5th rank, one of hundreds of women kept in the Tang court as ornaments and political tools, expected to age in the harem and die in obscurity. She had watched 2 emperors die. She had buried rivals, enemies, allies who became enemies, and children who threatened her. She had navigated a system designed entirely by men to keep women exactly where she had started, and she had not merely survived it. She had taken it apart and rebuilt it in her own image. Her name was Wu Zhao. History would call her Wu Zetian, the name she chose herself, meaning Wu who is like heaven. She ruled China for 15 years as its sole emperor, and for decades before that as its effective power from behind thrones she did not yet openly claim. She built hospitals and schools. She reformed the civil service to open it to talent regardless of birth. She expanded the empire. She was also ruthless, paranoid, and capable of ordering the deaths of people she had loved. This is not a simple story. The greatest stories never are. Wu Zhao was born in 624 into a family of the minor Tang aristocracy. Her father had been a timber merchant who parlayed business connections into a position of military supply during the founding of the Tang dynasty. Her mother Lady Yang was from a family of higher birth and gave Wu Zhao an unusual education for a girl of the period, reading, writing, music, history, and classical texts that formed the intellectual currency of the Tang court. This was not typical. It would prove to be the foundation of everything that followed. At 14, Wu Zhao was summoned to the imperial palace to become a concubine of Emperor Taizong, one of the great rulers of Chinese history. She entered at the 5th rank with the title Qianling, talented person, her function to entertain, be available, and remain silent on anything that mattered. The chronicles suggest Taizong found her capable of interesting conversation, unusual in his harem. But she was not elevated significantly. She was noticed and not acted upon, the most dangerous position in a palace, because it meant the attention was real but the protection was not. When Taizong died in 649, Wu Zhao faced the fate of all concubines who had not produced imperial children. She was sent to a Buddhist monastery to live as a nun, her head shaved, her connection to the world severed entirely. She was 24 years old. The palace, the silk robes, the proximity to power, all of it gone. What she was not told was that someone at court had not forgotten her. And that someone was about to become the most powerful man in the world. Before Emperor Taizong died, his son and heir Li Ji, who would become Emperor Gaozong, had developed a relationship with Wu Zhao that went beyond what was permitted. Under Tang law, a concubine of a deceased emperor was untouchable. Under any practical calculation, it was also an extraordinary opportunity. Wu Zhao was still in the monastery when Gaozong arranged for her return to the palace. The official version involves a ceremonial visit, tears, and a decision he could not be without her. The real version almost certainly involved Wu Zhao understanding exactly what she was doing and making herself available to be found. She returned to court not as a 5th-rank concubine but as a woman with the emperor's personal favor, a form of power in itself. She was given the title Zhaoi, 2nd-rank concubine, placing her among the most senior women in the palace hierarchy. She had gone from a Buddhist monastery to the inner circle of the most powerful court in the world. She was 26 years old. She had a plan. And she was just beginning. What separated Wu Zhao from the hundreds of other women in the Tang court was not beauty, the court had hundreds of beautiful women. It was her absolute clarity about what she wanted and her willingness to plan across years rather than days. Every decision she made from this point forward was part of a calculation that most people around her could not see. The monastery had not broken her. It had given her time to think. And she had thought carefully. The Tang court already had an empress, Wang Huanhe, impeccable aristocratic background, backed by Chancellor Chang's sons Huang and the most powerful faction in court. Wu Zhao's primary rival was consort Shao, who had been Gaozong's favorite before Wu's return and had produced imperial children. The competition was not merely personal, it was between different power bases, different networks of loyalty. Wu Zhao understood this. She had spent her time in the monastery thinking about exactly this kind of problem. In 654, Wu Zhao's infant daughter died. She accused Empress Wang of killing the child. Gaozong believed her. The accusation was almost certainly false. Several historians have argued Wu Zhao herself may have been responsible in order to destroy her rivals. The truth is inaccessible across 14 centuries. What is certain is the result: Empress Wang and consort Shao were stripped of rank, imprisoned, and executed. In 655, Wu Zhao was elevated to empress consort. The aristocratic faction that had blocked her was broken. She was 31 years old. The throne was now in reach. The old aristocratic network that had run the Tang court since its founding was gone. The men Chang's sons Huang had placed in key positions were gone. The officials who replaced them were Wu Zetians, promoted on merit or on loyalty to her. She had spent years building toward this, and she had executed it with precision that left no obvious seam to pull apart. She was empress. And a sick emperor was making her something more. Emperor Gaozong suffered a debilitating condition, severe headaches and deteriorating eyesight, probably high blood pressure, that became increasingly disabling through the 660s. He began relying on Wu Zetian to read and respond to official documents on his behalf. This was the opening she needed. The apparatus of imperial governance, petitions, appointments, military campaigns, foreign relations, passed through her hands first. The court called the arrangement the two sages, the emperor and empress ruling jointly. It was polite fiction for a reality everyone understood. She was not passive in this role. She promoted officials of capability regardless of birth, breaking the aristocratic monopoly on senior positions. She directed military campaigns in Korea and Central Asia that expanded Tang territory. She managed the relationship with Tibet with a combination of diplomacy and force. Critics called it a woman usurping power that belonged to men. Defenders called it a talented administrator running an empire whose nominal head was too ill to govern. Both were true. Neither was complete. What the chronicles cannot hide is the quality of the governance. The Tang Empire under the two sages arrangement was administered with a competence that later historians, even hostile ones, acknowledged. The frontier was expanded. The economy was managed. The bureaucracy functioned. The empire that was supposed to require a male emperor at its head was being run by a woman, and it was running well. The question that the court was beginning to ask, quietly, behind closed doors, was how long the fiction could last. Emperor Gaozong died in 683. Wu Zetian moved from de facto power to explicit control through maneuvers that displayed both political genius and ruthlessness on a scale her earlier career had only hinted at. She deposed her son Emperor Zhongzong after 6 weeks for trying to govern independently. She replaced him with another son who understood his role was ceremonial. When Li Jingye launched a rebellion in 684 with significant aristocratic support, she crushed it within a year. Then she built something to prevent it happening again. She established channels through which ordinary people could report officials suspected of disloyalty. The officials she empowered to investigate, men like Zhou Xing and Lai Junchen, remembered in Chinese history as her most feared instruments, conducted investigations that relied on torture and produced confessions that destroyed careers and lives. Officials who represented a threat were investigated, disgraced, exiled, or executed at a rate that kept the bureaucracy in permanent anxious compliance. She knew what she was doing. Fear was a tool. She used it with precision. The contradiction between the terror of her internal security apparatus and her genuine patronage of learning and religion is not one she seems to have felt. She commissioned Buddhist monasteries. She sponsored scholarship. She funded hospitals. She built institutions that would outlast her by centuries. Power and cultivation existed side by side in her understanding of what ruling meant. She was building and destroying simultaneously, and she saw no contradiction in it, because there was none. Both served the same purpose. Her continued hold on power. By 690, the fiction of ruling through her sons had become unnecessary. Wu Zetian was 65 years old, had been the real power in China for 30 years, and had accumulated enough control over the bureaucracy, the military, and the religious establishment to make the final step. She orchestrated a campaign of petitions, from officials, Buddhist monks, members of the public, requesting she take the throne directly. Political theater, coordinated by her. But political theater provides formal legitimacy that power alone cannot entirely supply. She renamed the dynasty the Zhou, echoing one of the great ancient Chinese dynasties. She declared herself Huangdi, emperor, using the same title male rulers had used for 1,000 years, without modification or feminization. She was not the empress. She was the emperor. Then she governed. She expanded the imperial examination system, making it accessible to men of ability from non-aristocratic families. She personally reviewed final examinations. The meritocratic principle she advanced was real, even if imperfect. It would survive her by 1,000 years. She moved the capital to Luoyang, more centrally located and less dominated by the old aristocracy. Under her patronage it became one of the great cities of the medieval world, a center of Buddhist culture, international trade, and artistic production that drew visitors from across Asia. The military campaigns she directed expanded Tang territory at multiple frontiers. She was not a pacifist. The expansion was not gentle. But it was effective. She was building an empire worthy of the title she had given herself. In her later years, Wu Zetian kept male favorites at court, young men who served as companions and possibly lovers, given access and influence that caused fierce resentment among the official bureaucracy. The two most notable were brothers named Zhang Changzong and Zhang Yizhi, beautiful, charming, and entirely unqualified for the political roles they were given. The chronicles record the court's reaction with undisguised disgust. Male emperors maintaining harems of hundreds of women was unremarked upon and expected. A female emperor maintaining male companions was a scandal officials felt entitled to protest formally and repeatedly. She ignored them. She had been ignoring men who told her what she could not do for 60 years. But the Zhang brothers were also a practical problem. They were not capable administrators. They created networks of patronage around themselves that distorted the bureaucracy she had spent decades building. Officials who wanted access to the aging emperor cultivated the brothers rather than demonstrating merit. The system she had reformed began to corrode. She was still emperor. Still making decisions. But the court surrounding her in the last years was not the court she had built. And the men she had elevated were beginning to calculate. Chancellor Zhang Jianji and the senior officials who moved against her in 705 were not ideological opponents. They were pragmatists who had served her loyally for years and who now calculated that the dynasty needed to be secured against the uncertainty of her succession. The Zhang brothers were the excuse. The aging emperor's failing health was the opportunity. They had decided. And in a court where she had spent decades ensuring that opposition was fatal, they were still willing to move against her. That tells you how far the calculation had shifted. In 705, Wu Zetian was 80 years old and seriously ill. Chancellor Zhang Jianji led senior officials into the palace in force. They killed the Zhang brothers. Then they went to Wu Zetian's sick room. They confronted the woman who had ruled China for 50 years, lying ill in her bed, and they demanded she abdicate in favor of her son Li Zhao, the emperor she had deposed 21 years earlier. What she said in that room, what she felt when the men she had elevated came to take what she had spent 50 years building, is not recorded by any source that survived. The chronicles note only that she agreed to abdicate. She had little choice. She was ill. The Zhang brothers were dead. The palace guard supported the coup. Li Zhao was restored as Emperor Gaozong and the Tang dynasty was re-established. The Zhou dynasty she had created lasted 15 years. The Tang had lasted 60 before she interrupted it and would last 200 after. She was allowed to keep her imperial title and was moved to a palace outside the capital. She died 8 months later in November 705, aged approximately 81, an extraordinary lifespan for any era, suggesting a physical constitution as formidable as the political one. She left a will ordering her burial beside Emperor Gaozong at the Qianling Mausoleum. The man whose death had freed her to rule China as she chose would be her companion in death. The request was granted. At the Qianling Mausoleum in Shaanxi province stands the wordless stele, Wu Zibei, a massive stone tablet Wu Zetian ordered erected beside her tomb with no inscription. The traditional explanation, almost too perfect. My achievements are too great to be captured in words. Let posterity judge me. The more prosaic explanation. She knew she was dying in political disgrace, and any inscription would be subject to revision by the dynasty resuming without her. A blank stele cannot be erased, edited, or contradicted. The stele is still there. 1400 years old. Blank as she ordered it. But covered in 1,200 characters of graffiti from visitors across the centuries, officials and pilgrims and travelers adding their own commentary on the woman buried beside it. She could not have predicted this outcome. But if she had, she might have approved. Wu Zetian was always better at letting the world speak for itself. The blank stele, covered in other people's writing, is perhaps the most honest monument she could have left. She said, "Let posterity judge me." Posterity has been arguing ever since. The expansion of the imperial examination system was Wu Zetian's most consequential administrative legacy. The system had existed before her but was dominated by the aristocracy, who could afford the years of education required and used social connections to influence results. She expanded the pool of eligible competitors, added examination categories rewarding different skills, and enforced results in ways that reduced the role of personal connection. This was not purely altruistic, a bureaucracy loyal to the system was loyal to the person running it. But it also produced better officials. The two motivations aligned perfectly. She moved the imperial capital to Luoyang, less dominated by the old aristocracy and more central to China's agricultural heartland. Under her patronage it became one of the great cities of the medieval world. The Longmen grottos, some of the greatest Buddhist sculptures ever created, were carved under her sponsorship. The Silk Road trade routes she protected made Tang China fabulously wealthy. The military campaigns she directed expanded Tang territory at multiple frontiers. She was building a civilization, not just holding a title. The examination system she expanded would survive for another 1,000 years, continuing through the Song, Ming, and Qing dynasties until the 20th century, shaping Chinese governance across 14 centuries. The officials it produced would administer the largest empire in the world through periods of extraordinary change. Her most lasting contribution was not a building or a battle but a principle, that ability matters more than birth, embedded in an institution strong enough to outlast her by a millennium. The history of how Wu Zetian has been judged is almost as interesting as what she actually did. Tang dynasty officials after her death had strong reasons to construct a negative portrait. The official histories emphasized the executions, the secret police, the Zhang brothers, and the violation of Confucian propriety. She became the archetype of the dangerous woman, the concubine who rises too high, the female ruler whose ambition destabilizes the natural order, the cautionary tale that justified keeping women out of power forever. This portrait was enormously influential and enormously unfair in its selectivity. The same historians who condemned her for executing political enemies said nothing comparable about male emperors who had done the same or worse. The same scholars who emphasized the Zhang brothers said nothing comparable about imperial harems considered an unremarkable feature of male sovereignty. The judgment was not applied even-handedly because the framework was not even. She was judged as a woman who had overreached. Male emperors were judged as emperors who had governed. The reassessment continues. Modern scholarship has been considerably more generous, recognizing her administrative achievements, her expansion of the examination system, and her capable governance of a complex empire through difficult periods. The truth is that she was neither the monster her enemies described nor the feminist icon that some admirers have tried to make her. She was a person of extraordinary intelligence and will who operated within and against the systems of her time, using every tool available, and who built and destroyed in roughly equal measure. Wu Zetian ruled China, in one capacity or another, for nearly half a century. She entered the palace as a child and left it as an old woman who had to be removed by force. In between she had navigated every obstacle a system built entirely to exclude her could place in her path, and had not merely survived those obstacles but converted them into stepping stones. She was the only woman who ever sat on the dragon throne. In 1400 years since her death, no woman has come close. She said, "Let posterity judge me." The examination system she built lasted 1,000 years after her death. The blank steel she left has accumulated 14 centuries of other people's commentary. The dragon throne she sat on has never been occupied by a woman since. She was not reducible to a single verdict, not the monster her enemies made her, not the saint her admirers wanted. She was what she had always said she was. An emperor. The only one China ever produced who was a woman. And history, argue about her as it does, has never been able to put her down.